Hello, everybody. My name is Surjan, and welcome to the new episode of Game Dev is Not Easy. For the second episode of the show, I have Airdorf with me, the developer of Fate, the Unholy Trinity. Hello, Airdorf.
Hey, how's it going? And I love the title of the podcast, by the way.
Thank you. It feels like we just talked about this.
It does feel like we just talked about it. I'm getting deja vu.
Yeah, for the listeners to know, I basically, when we were 4 minutes into the new episode, I noticed that I wasn't recording myself. And so we're going to have a little bit of deja vu. But we basically talked about, what did we talk about? Ocarina of Time?
Well, yeah, we talked about comfort games and how it's really hard to play through your backlog. It's like really fun to create a backlog and be like, ooh, this game looks really cool. Like I found this rare gem on itch. And then you're like, all right, time to sit down and play new games. I think I'll start an 18th run of Ocarina of Time, because it's my comfort game.
Hey, man. Yeah, you start that run. I'm going to keep playing World of Warcraft because we're old people at this point, and we're staying alive with our comfort games. And we came to that conclusion because I was admiring how I love Fate as a series, but I only played the first episode because I have just a bad habit of keeping things in my backlog. And then we started talking about our comfort games because that is what's keeping us from our backlogs.
That's right. I blame Nintendo.
But yeah, but before we ended the episode right there, I asked you, can you just tell us a bit about yourself, the listeners, so we can get to know you better? Like, what were you doing before Faith? What are you doing right now? Just who are you as a person?
Yeah, so I don't know. Caucasian male, 6'2", brown hair, shoe size 11 and a half, depends on the product. Yeah, that's about it. Well, I started getting into like horror media and especially horror games when I was in secondary school. So I remember going to a friend's house and we rented Fatal Frame for the PlayStation 2, and we played it for several hours. It was really scary. I'd been scared from playing games before, like playing Doom when I was like 8 years old, or 9 or whatever, and getting scared by there's a monster coming after me. But that was like my first like real survival horror gaming experience. And Fatal Frame's actually, the series is a series that I really love. I think that Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly, is a masterclass in survival horror design, especially the lead up.
I was about to say, whenever I post something about Fatal Frame to the Crimson Butterfly, I always see you.
Oh, I'm there
in the either in the mentions or
I'm
the retweets,
there, man.
but you're always.
I gotta let the world
know.
know
You love that game.
Yeah, and what I always end up saying is that the encounter, the lead up to the first encounter with the first ghost right after you pick up the camera obscura, I think is just again a masterclass in horror design, like how to prime the player to be scared, how to tease a scare, and how to finally reveal it. It has such an energy buildup, and the rest of the game maintains it. Like, man, they throw all kinds of stuff at you. So yeah, I try to play Fatal Frame 2 every now and then just to kind of stay fresh and stay inspired and stay humble, I guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I get that. Yeah, because there is just something interesting and special about those old survival horror games, especially from the PlayStation 2 era. When you play them again these days, you kind of just think, why can't anybody do this anymore?
Yeah,
it is so interesting because a lot more people can develop games now with indie gaming, with booming right now. People have more accessible resources to game development.
Yeah.
You kind of think, why can't we just do this? Just let everyone make survival horror games.
I think we're in a really fun era of spiritual successors, and the nostalgia. What I've observed is that the nostalgia era is starting to shift from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2 and like Sega Dreamcast and stuff. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, like not everyone can just like assemble Team Silent, to make a spiritual successor to Silent Hill 2. And, I got my own thoughts about the remake and stuff. But yeah, that I started, my horror gaming, journey about 18 years ago back in secondary school. I didn't know about indie horror games until around 2011 when I was at school studying animation. And a buddy of mine was like, "Dude, have you heard of Slender Man?" I was like, "No, what's that? Is that like a movie?"
Oh, brother.
Little did I know. And I went online and I click on the first video about Slender Man, and it goes, "Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier, and welcome to Slender Man: The 8 Pages." And that started my that started my journey into this world of, to me it was like underground comics. Have you ever been to like a comic shop, and in the dark corners of the shop there's like the underground indie stuff from like super local artists? I went to a comic shop in San Francisco over the GDC week, and they had like a whole rack of like indie underground stuff that was like really cool. It was like, in most cases it was just like paper folded in half and stapled together. It was pretty crazy. But that's kind of how I saw these indie games, and I always wanted to be a part of it. Like, watching Slender, and playing Slender, and all the creepypasta adaptations, of varying quality. And then I kept watching Markiplier, so when I wasn't playing horror games, I was watching him because, I don't know, there's just something I really liked about him, especially in the earlier years. And I actually owe a lot of my horror game design acumen to just watching him and observing his reactions to stuff. And I like to tell the story that that was so important to like how I developed as a designer, that I actually put in scares in Faith, particularly chapter 1, that I thought would scare Markiplier, because I thought that maybe one day he would play it and get scared at those parts, and he did, which was like pretty crazy. Like, a couple years after I released chapter 1. So yeah, that's kind of how I started developing kind of my interest in indie horror. But it wasn't until around 2015, 2016, when I kind of started getting these ideas. Some of them came to me in dreams. I was just explaining this to someone that I was having nightmares about stuff in Faith before I made Faith. It was pretty crazy to see that actually show up on the screen, in chapter 3. There's a couple of scenes in chapter 3 that are like straight out of those dreams I was having in 2015 that kind of spurred me on into kind of the monster design and stuff. And I had like zero experience making games besides some like ROM hacking stuff I used to do in high school, and one game design assignment that I did in university. And originally Faith was going to be something like a point and click game with exorcisms, and then I kind of wanted to do a PT clone because in 2014 I played PT and it like blew my mind. I wanted to make a minimalist, self-contained, really mysterious and obscure horror game, And then I thought to myself, well, I don't really know how to do that, like technically, like graphics wise. So I was like, I've used GameMaker before. What if I went the opposite direction and made like an Atari horror game? Could I actually make that scary? And yeah, that was kind of the constraint that I gave myself, like old school restrictions, or I guess you'd say design constraints. Because Faith could never run on an actual Atari or Amiga or anything. It's, but I wanted to kind of capture the feeling of playing, kind of a cursed, demonic 8-bit game from that era. And yeah, that became the thing that I'm known for.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think you accomplished that. You are known for being that person. Whenever a new developer, submits their game for me to check out, I share it. I always see people, this looks like Faith. Is this an Airdorf game? That is, I think, an incredible accomplishment at this day and age where everything is so contrasted and there is so many of everything. You are this sole person, known for this thing. You know how Puppet Combo was known for PlayStation, slashers.
The godfather of serial killer simulators that look like PlayStation games.
Oh yeah. And then you are known for this thing. I think that's incredible.
It's funny the memes that come out of Faith. For one, it's scary easy to make a Faith meme. You just need like Microsoft Paint and you need blue and white and it's like super easy. But it's like now I get like pinged on Twitter whenever someone sees a picture of a priest and there's like vaguely the color blue. Like they're like, Airdorf, check this out. It's like I've become like the authority on not just religious
I still,
stuff, but like any kind of pixel horror game, you know.
yeah, I still remember just people spamming Mortis under fake posts. It's just
Yeah,
became
leave a
such a,
Mortis in chat. That's right.
yeah, such a massive thing. That's incredible. So Faith was your first and only game then.
Well, I've done a couple of like little commission games. So I did. So IFC Midnight, who they distributed like Autopsy of Jane Doe, The Babadook, Human Centipede, stuff like that.
Yeah.
They tapped me to do a couple of game adaptations to promote some of their new releases. So in 2019, I did a very short, like just web-based game for The Wind, which I think you can watch on Netflix. Depends on your region. Directed by Emma Tammy, who went on to direct Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie. And
Oh, okay.
because now we have a movie based on the game, and if it was the early 2000s, we would have Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie, the game, because they were doing that a lot in that era. So anyway, Emma Tammy liked the game so much that she recommended me to a couple of other filmmakers and their like production companies. So I ended up doing a game for Extraordinary, which is this like Irish-based ghost story comedy that has like Will Forte in it. That was a fun one to do. And then me and Torpal Duke, who did Hand of Doom for the DreadX collections, and then standalone Hand of Doom for DreadX. He and I collaborated on a Murder Hornets documentary game to promote that on Discovery Plus. And then my most recent commission was with IFC Midnight doing a game for their film Hatching. It's like a Scandinavian like coming of age movie about a little girl who is training to become a gymnast, and she gets distracted from that goal, from that like life that her mother is like pushing on her, when she discovers this giant egg in her yard, and the egg hatches, and it's like some of the coolest like puppet creature effects. Like if you love practical ooey gooey slimy bloody creature effects, then you got to watch Hatching. Watch it just for that, you know. So
I will absolutely watch
yeah,
it.
so I did a couple of those, and then we did Earl's Day Off, which was a fishing horror game for the Fishing Horror Jam, and we almost landed like a huge publishing contract to make a full game for that. Me and Torpal did. And so yeah, there's been a few developments, but yeah, my bread and butter, I guess you could say, is Faith, and I really don't mind it. It's a very fun game to like make and talk about, and I think that I got really lucky with a few things that I put in the game, like the text to speech audio voice lines, and they work really well for that type of game, and the rotoscoped animations that I did, you know, putting my animation skills to the task. Yeah. I think some things really came together. I think it was like the right time for Faith to come out when it did, and I'm just very thankful that the players and the fans like maintained their enthusiasm and their hype for the game all the way from 2017 to 2022 when I launched the Unholy Trinity with New Blood. You know, it was crazy. But yeah, I things really came together, and I consider myself very, very blessed to be part of this community and to have made a game like Faith. Yesterday, so a quick, like a personal note, 30 years ago, my parents got me an original Game Boy for Christmas, and it had The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on it, which I played the crap out of. I played for like 6 years trying to beat it, you know, when you're a little kid, you know.
Yeah.
But that game taught me about game worlds, and that you can attach emotions and feelings to these little pixels, you know, in this little game world. And that was about the time when I was like 6 years old that I knew that I wanted to learn everything I could about games and make my own game someday. 30 years later, I'm proud to say that I was playing Faith on the Nintendo Switch, and we're working on a Switch release this year. We're doing the development right now, and doing testing and stuff and getting it ready for lot check hopefully this summer. And it's just unreal. Yeah. Like I feel extremely grateful that things kind of lined up in my life to where I could see that happen,
Yeah, from playing games on a Nintendo console to playing your own game on a Nintendo console. That is incredible to listen to.
Completely unreal.
And yeah, what you said was really interesting, and I agree. Fate, I think, released at the perfect time. It was a passing period for horror games. It was, I think, very oversaturated with PT clones, and people were hungry for something new. Like you would have the Five Nights at Freddy's, PT clones, this, that, Amnesias. People were just hungry and looking for something new, something interesting. And I think Fate was that thing. Analog horror was also picking up the pace slowly. I think, yeah, that was the perfect time.
Yeah,
and then the community
I think so.
appreciated it. The community is still so active and big as far as I can see. Yeah, Fate, I think, has been a great addition to just horror gaming in general.
Well, I certainly hope so. I would be lying if I said that I wasn't like trying to make a difference, because I'm kind of like you. I observed how I wouldn't say it was stagnant, and I know that's not what you're saying, but yeah, there was a lot of like PT clones and FNAF clones, and I love the FNAF series. Well, at least the first like 4 games, not 3, and
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And I was tired of like zombie crafting survival games, and if you like those types of games, that great. It's just not my thing. And I thought, and Akuma Kira and their team were doing Spooky's House of Jump Scares, and I think working on Lost in Vivo at the time, which are some of my favorite horror games of all time. So they were innovators, all right. And Puppet Combo was like leading the charge with the serial killer slasher PS1 games. So there were some cool developments. But yeah, I was like, man, besides old Scott Cawthon with some of these FNAF like mini games that kind of look like Atari games, no one's really moving in the opposite direction, that I could tell. And so I thought maybe I could kind of carve out a niche, market for myself and, get noticed. And I think focusing on like the bright colors, strength, not being afraid to use like arcade kind of 8-bit music, and and I mentioned the colors and some of those like blocky pixels, and I purposely made the game very, very low resolution. So it was an interesting time. I was also observing that creepypasta games were kind of on the decline, and they were getting replaced by like just silly meme games, like, I don't know, Shrek Stalks You in the Woods Simulator or something.
Oh my god, I was thinking of the same exact
Oh, is that an actual game?
Shrek game. No, I don't know if it's an actual game, but I was
There's
thinking
got
of
to
Shrek
be,
as a horror
there's
game.
got to be a
I
Shrek
swear I
horror
was
game
thinking
where
of the same
yeah,
thing.
That's funny.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, like you mentioned, the analog horror phenomenon, like the ARG horror phenomenon. Like I'm a big fan of Nightmind and the work that his channel does, like highlighting ARG and analog horror. I'm not a huge fan of analog horror, but I think it's a really interesting kind of development. Like I'm a huge fan of like Kane Pixels and Oldest View, and his work on the Backrooms I think is incredible. So yeah, it was. I mean, the landscape of indie horror is always changing, and that's what attracts me to it so much. There's always something that surprises me, especially with some of those like Twitter threads that you start where you ask people, creators to post their stuff. Like I'm always like, surprised by several titles that I've never even heard of that just look really cool, and I'm just kind of, rooting for them to finish so I can get my hands on it and play it,
Hell yeah, and that's why I'm doing them. Because, most of them go under the radar, and we just got to do what we can to, get them to more people.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. So we talked about making Faith, but I don't think I still know where did you make Paint? Not Paint, Faith. Did you use Paint? How did you make Faith? What engine is it working on?
Yeah, it's on GameMaker. That's like the only engine I trust myself to make a full game with. Like I know some Unity and a little bit of Unreal. But yeah, GameMaker, it's got its quirks, but if you're a developer who like doesn't want to deal with like object-oriented programming and like the syntax of all that stuff, and just wants to like put an object with a sprite in a room moving around doing stuff in the space of like 5 minutes, then that, like, I highly recommend GameMaker. Also, it has, and I'm not endorsed by GameMaker or sponsored by them anyway, I just really like that platform. Yeah. Also, it is, in my opinion, the best documented, it has the best and most thorough documentation you could ask for an IDE, and you can, the staff at GameMaker is surprisingly small and personable. Like, I met them at GDC a couple of years ago, and they were super, super nice. When they found out that I developed exclusively in GameMaker, they were super interested. They were like, hey, they're like, oh, you want to put your games on the Nintendo Switch? Hey, we can do that now. Hey, if you need any help, like any technical help with getting your game on Switch, just let us know, So they're like the least corporatized, besides maybe Godot, of the IDEs that I've found. And so I've stayed loyal to them, for forever. I made Summer Night, which was my contribution to the first DreadX collection that DreadX did in 2020, I think it was. Yeah, it was during the lockdowns and stuff.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so I made Summer Night in Unity because there's this big twist at the end that required a different game, a game engine that could handle that. And then we made Earl's Day Off in Unity, and then we did Murder Hornets, and me and Torpal did Murder Hornets in Unity. Other than that, I just use GameMaker. And as for the graphics, I have a subscription to Photoshop. I really like that it has the timeline editor so that I can do my like frame-by-frame animation. I used to do the rotoscoped cutscenes with just a mouse. And which really destroyed my wrist. And then some fans were, like frame by frame, 15 frames per second. Some of the animations were like 6 seconds long. So, it's about 90 frames that I'm drawing with a mouse,
Oof, I can just imagine.
And, I told some of my fans about it, and they're like, why don't you get a display tablet? And so I raised some money with their help to purchase a display tablet, and that's what I use now, and it allowed me to have over 1,000 frames of animation in Chapter 3. Let me see.
Oh yeah, so you ended up actually adding graphical fidelity.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me look up those stats. Right. Oh wow, yeah. So as of in February 2022, so Chapter 3 wasn't even done yet. I tweeted that I've drawn about 2,902 individual frames of animation for Chapter 3.
I think I remember that.
And Chapter 1 had 493. Chapter 2 had around 1,000. So yeah, it was... Yeah. There's one cutscene that had over 600 individual frames and lasted about a minute, And so I was really able to...
That's a lot of frames.
Yeah, but it was that kind of handcrafted quality that I really wanted for this game. I wanted the rotoscoped cutscenes to really pop out and disturb the player. And I think in terms of like Uncanny Valley kind of stuff and the juxtaposition of something that moves like an Atari game and then you suddenly see something that moves like it could be human, I thought that was a really cool combination, and I wanted to experiment with it. Again, it paid off. I consider myself lucky, But yeah, it did take a lot of work.
Yeah, I think it worked because when I see people talk or post about Fate, I always see them posting a screenshot from one of the rotoscope scenes, either a GIF or a screenshot or a video. But I think people remember Fate by those rotoscope scenes. Like, they are so memorable. I still remember almost all of them from the first episode, and if I had played them for like the second or the third episode, I would also remember them. I think you did an incredible job in the first episode, and I can't even imagine the third one. I saw some spoilers. I tried not to get spoiled.
It's hard not to. It's hard not to get spoiled with games these days.
Yeah, people love those scenes, and I saw them on Tumblr, Instagram, Twitter. They were everywhere. I think you did an incredible job.
Well, thank you very much.
I don't know any other developer who does that. I know one person. I can't remember
the guy who did Horror of Salazar House.
Yes,
And
their name was Maldo something.
yeah, they were working with Puppet Combo on that one, and I liked that game. And what's notable about those rotoscope cutscenes is that they're actually colored in, like there's actually like shading and stuff, whereas mine are like these like kind of neon outlines. That was to like keep my sanity, you know. And so I really got to hand it to them. I can't confirm if they were like directly inspired by Faith. There is a reference to Faith in one of the rooms in the game, like in the library. There's a bunch of references to other games. But yeah, it was just a random decision I made production wise. So it goes back to SpongeBob, which everything in my life goes back to SpongeBob. In the first couple of seasons, there's these like scenes where they like zoom in on their faces, and it's like an extremely detailed digital painting.
Oh yeah,
you know, the like I don't need it, you know, part.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I wanted to do something like that, and there's a show at the time on Cartoon Network called The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, and they did that too. There's an episode where everyone gets the bubonic plague from this like one rat that's running around. And as soon as they get the plague, they instantly turn into this like grotesque, hyper detailed like beef jerky version of their character. So I wanted to have something like that, and yeah, that cutscene of Amy grabbing the edge of the bed and standing up and revealing herself was the first one. It used to be just like a PNG, like a layer of her just kind of rising slowly from behind the bed, and I think that would have been effective. But man, I'm so glad that I took the steps to experiment, you know. And that was back when I was giving myself a lot of time to make Faith. I didn't have chapter 1 didn't have a budget. I didn't have a publisher. I was just making it for the fun of it. You know, it was an extremely not optimized game that I later had to go back and fix, like overhaul a bunch of the save stuff and a bunch of the graphic stuff. Like it would tank people's graphics cards because each frame of animation was at full resolution instead of being like upscaled during runtime. So it's just like nuking people's graphics cards. It's like game that looks like it should have run on hardware from 30 years ago, you know? And who am I kidding? 40 years ago. I still think the 80s were 20 years ago. And yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, I didn't have any plans for Faith until around the time that it started gaining traction, and I was like, "Oh crap, maybe I should make like another one." And this time charge for it.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask something related to that. So we already kind of talked about it, but you know, like Fate's visual fidelity is obviously lower than your other run-of-the-mill horror games. It's not made in Unreal or Unity. Were you at any point nervous about Fate's visuals? Were you like nervous people would make fun of it instead and not understand the thing that you were going for?
Oh, that's a good question. So I always start with what scares me, you know? That's why I'm not interested in making like zombie games unless they're really scary zombies, or like, I don't know. I'm not really scared of like vampires and like werewolves and like serial killers. I mean, in real life, yeah, I would be scared of those things. But that's just not my brand of horror. So I'm very supernatural, paranormal based, like, you know, demonic stuff I find very interesting. And, you know, as a religious person, I firmly believe in the spiritual realm. And so stuff like that, you know, is what scares me more than anything. So when I make a game, I focus on what I find creepy and scary. And it's not like I'm this like hardened like horror fanatic who's like totally desensitized, you know. I'm still pretty sensitive to like, you know, silly horror movies. Like the Paranormal Activity films, just like they still get me every time. Like I find them to be like extremely scary and stuff. But yeah, I just start with what scares me. So I had confidence that I'll put it to you this way. There's Mark Brown, that guy who does a lot of he's on YouTube. He does a lot of game design video essays. He did like the Boss Keys series for the Zelda dungeons. He had this interesting quote where he talked about instead of making a game that you think a lot of people will like, you should focus on making a game that you know a few people will love, especially when you're starting out small. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't like go big if that's what you really want to do. I just wanted to, you know, if there was people out there who longed for an 8-bit game that scared the living hell out of them, then I wanted to be that guy for them. I wanted to provide them with that. And again, I think I got lucky. I think it released at a time where it was kind of primed to be kind of a new and fresh thing, ironically, because it looks so old. So I wasn't really worried about that. I had faith. Oh gosh, I believed in myself that I believed in myself that I would be able to provide a cool horror experience for some people. I had no idea it would get as well known as it is, and I'm still kind of in denial that it's that big of a deal. But I guess I still consider myself kind of a small time, obscure developer, and I like that. I like that, by the way. What I was really nervous about was like sequelitis. Again, to quote another YouTuber, I was really afraid that as I moved into Chapter 2, fans would think it was too different. And then, because the structure of Chapter 2 is very different from 1, in my opinion, but I think it's one of my favorites. I mean, they're all my favorite, but I especially love Chapter 2 because of the stuff that I did that I don't think got very well preserved in Chapter 3, because Chapter 3 went in different directions, but I would love to make more horror games in the format that I did Chapter 2 in. And then Chapter 3, I mean, production took 4 years on Chapter 3. By the end of it, I was in team meetings with the New Blood guys and showing off my new stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, and there's like a demon that sprouts out of this woman's face because she, stuffed 490 newborn infants into her face, which has a hole carved out of it, which turned into a portal to hell, and this gigantic, horrible demon flies out of her face. And I'm like, is that even scary? Like, is that disturbing at all to y'all? And like, I remember like totally not believing in myself that I was making like good horror content. Like Andrew Holsholt, who's the guy that makes a lot of the music and audio for a lot of the New Blood releases, he was like, hey, I just have one question for you, Airdorf. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that is so creepy and terrible. Like, that's so like freaky. I was like, oh, okay. Like, sorry, I don't know if I can curse on your podcast, but you can bleep me out. But
go ahead. No, it's all
okay.
good.
I'll enable potty mouth. So that was so stuff like that, and really the support of the New Blood guys and getting like honest, feedback from them. And their support and their encouragement, that's what kind of carried me through all the doubts I was having. And there were even times when Dave was like, you should make it like this. That would be really scary. And I was like, you can't you know what? You're right. Like, so I was like, you know what? I am going to push this further. And I did. And there are parts of Faith that are just like batshit crazy. Like, the final boss is more akin to an Undertale fight than a traditional Faith fight, and it gets so crazy that in the middle of the boss fight, the final boss stops and tells you to take a break and then asks you if you have life insurance. Like, that's the final boss of Faith. And so I was really nervous. I didn't know that people would like it, but and especially because around the time Faith was getting finished, it was like reaching a boiling point as far as people messaging me, like demanding to see Chapter 3, I was getting like 5-10 messages a day, asking like, where's Faith? Where's Chapter 3? And then as soon as I released Chapter 3 on PC, in Unholy Trinity on PC, I thought all that would be over, but then all those comments and messages switched to, when is Faith on Switch? Like, so yeah, it never ends, but it released and it did, like, it performed way better than I ever thought it would. Basically in the first quarter, it performed better than I thought it would in its lifetime. So again, very blessed. And I got to thank the Faith fans and players for not just being patient with me during those years of development, which I don't think 3 years is that long for a one-person team to make a game. That's like 4 times as big as the first installment. But I am thankful for their patience, and thankful for the word of mouth and the, telling other people about my games and getting them interested in trying Faith for themselves and recommending it to streamers and stuff. Streamers like the guys at Vinesauce and Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, Gab Smolders, Manly Badass Hero, Alpha Beta Gamer. They were all instrumental in getting the word out, and very thankful for all of that.
So kind of interested in similar topic.
Yeah.
So you released the game in episodic format, and it's kind of unusual for horror games. How was your experience with that? Did you at any point think about, oh, you know what, 2 and 3, they're gonna be just one game. I'm gonna just call this early access, and then I'm gonna release the full game. Did you ever think about that? Would you do an episodic game again? Like, were you happy with that format?
Yeah, that's a great question. The episodic format was very messy for me, and I don't recommend it for everyone. And I actually had a lot of discussion with Dave Oshry, who's the CEO at New Blood and produced Faith. He was a huge supporter of the game, and I have a lot to thank him for. But yeah, we had discussions about this, and I disagreed with him. I thought that if Ultra Kill got to be on early access, or Gloomwood, or some of the other games at New Blood got to be on early access, why couldn't Faith be on early access? I could start seeing revenue from it. That would be a huge motivator for me. We could start getting reviews and feedback. And Dave was like, no, we're gonna take chapter 1 and 2, we're gonna improve on them, and then we're gonna take chapter 3 and not tell anyone about it, like just kind of tease it, and then we're gonna release it all on all platforms, around Halloween. And the all platforms thing obviously didn't happen. We just had the PC version. That was like a compromise we had to make, because it was that last month of development to get Faith on Steam was rough, really rough. And we can talk about the mental health aspect of making games in a little bit. But yeah, the episodic format, I think it works for some games, but it was messy. And the reason I say that it's messy is because I released chapter 1 without a publisher. It was pay what you want, so donationware. It was in a very small pond. I got to be a big fish in that little pond, but it was in a small venue, Itch and Game Jolt. But I it's almost not worth mentioning because the like SEO algorithms on Itch is just so much better than Game Jolt. Like, you have way more chance of getting noticed on Itch than on Game Jolt. And don't even get me started on IndieDB. I freaking hate that platform. Not the people that run it. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know what the purpose of IndieDB is. It's extremely.
I don't know how to navigate.
It's extremely restrictive for creators, in my opinion. But anyway, so free or pay what you want. And some people were very generous. There were some players who paid $100 for Faith on Itch. There was one who paid $2,000 for Faith. But it was because they accidentally input 2000 instead of 20.00 for the price. So they emailed me. It was like, no, I accidentally gave you $2,000 for Faith. I didn't mean to do that. That's like all my money. I was like, okay, hold on. Just email Itch. No, at first I said, oh, wow, thank you. That's very generous of you. And they're like, no. And I was just joking, And I said, okay, email Itch support and they'll get you a refund. But even $20, I was like, man, that's very generous. Thank you. And they got their refund, And then I made Faith Chapter 2, in discussions with my spouse, and talking about how, Faith Chapter 1 was like, at its height of popularity, it was like paying for a pretty nice date night every week that, we were going on. And so we were thinking, like, maybe I should just charge like $1 for Chapter 2. And here's the thing about doing episodes and making one free and one paid. There was a paid version of Chapter 1. If you paid for it, it gave you the ability to save and load your progress after you close the game. I put that behind a paywall. That was pretty scummy of me, but anyway, Chapter 2 was $1 on itch.io in 2019. Chapter 2 made it numbers wise, it did better in its first month than Faith Chapter 1 did in its first year. But Faith Chapter 1 always had like 7 times the downloads of Chapter 2. So the amount of the player count, I guess you could say, or the number of downloads dropped severely from chapter 1 to chapter 2. It wasn't that I was I was very satisfied with how chapter 2 like was released, and it got featured, it got played by a bunch of YouTubers and stuff. I was very happy with it, but the reality of it was, if I had been a little more fair to myself and the hard work that I put into those games with the pricing, maybe it would have turned out differently if I had released them at the same time. But I was still just kind of feeling stuff out. I just wanted to see where my place was in the indie horror scene. And then chapter 3 changed all of that, because by that time I was with New Blood. Dave and I worked out a deal where we would release chapters 1, 2, and 3 all at the same time with a few extra features, and work on, maintain and add to it as the years went by. That meant that I had to delist, for all intents and purposes, the itch versions of chapter 1 and 2. And that was really painful for me, and there were some fans who took offense to that because they saw that as pulling the rug out from under them, and instead charging $15 for something that used to be free. When in my opinion it wasn't even the same version of the software, And so you're not gonna satisfy everyone, but I still think it was the best decision to do, because it would have been too complicated otherwise. And now that we have a coherent, or a cohesive package of all three, the unholy trinity, now we can put it on Xbox if we want. We put it on GOG, we even put the unholy trinity on itch, and the hate mail that I got eventually subsided.
Yeah, I mean, putting a fair price on your game, or just anything in general, your art, your music, it's always a challenging thing. And sometimes, no matter what you do, people will dislike it.
Oh, yeah.
I think it is really important to put a fair price, though. I see a lot of indie developers struggling with this and underselling their games, and it is hurting them. And I wish that wasn't a thing, but hopefully it's kind of getting better with more people, consulting each other and listening to other people, other developers who did this before.
Oh yeah, for better or worse, social media's got us all keeping tabs on each other.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
exactly. The indie developers are now in a more closed community now. They talk to each other. They consult each other. I think it's much better now.
Yeah, I've actually gone to a bunch of. I've gone to a couple of fellow creators and a few content creators who focus on horror games for advice on on things like Instagram ads and in merch and plushies and stuff. I would love to make a huggable plushie of John that he gives a line from the game when you hug him, and so hopefully we'll have some news on that pretty soon to announce in that regard. But the early access route worked really well for Gloomwood, which is still being developed at New Blood, for Ultra Kill, which is the juggernaut of indie first-person shooters. It's insane how popular Ultra Kill is, and I think it's really cool that it's the highest-rated Steam FPS game on Steam. And I'm really humbled, I guess, and inspired to work with next to people like Andrew Holschult and Hakita and Dylan Rogers, Leon Zawada, the guys at Medieval, and David Szymanski.
Yep.
Every single one of my peers, I guess, or fellow developers at New Blood, including the staff. I have to give a big shout out to the QA staff at New Blood. They're incredible. So I had access to the QA staff, all throughout development, and they're kind of all around the world. So if I need someone at 2 a.m., there's usually someone who's awake who can, test something out for me. Excellent communication. They're timely. And their job is very hard because they're all working on several titles at once. So incredible QA team. I couldn't have released Faith, the Unholy Trinity in October 2022 without them, and without Dave's guidance and encouragement. But yeah, the thing you gotta know about indie games is that, and I'm sure you've seen this from either talking or interviewing, is that like the sheer human potential of what you can create in a game is just unleashed when you're working for yourself, or when the restraints are off, and and you're kind of doing it full time and stuff. So creators like Hakita, like he is a machine, like making content for Ultra Kill. It's incredible some of the new stuff that he's doing, and I'm always like blown away by how much progress Hakita and the team at Ultra Kill has been able to make on the game. And I know there will always be fans and players who are like, oh, they're taking forever, like why are they, it's been 3 minutes and nothing from Airdorf, like, so there's always going to be that impatience. But man, I'm so inspired by the professionalism and the skills and the creativity and the design skills of the guys at New Blood. Like they really have something special there. And so there's a reason why they're some of the highest rated boomer shooters out there. There's a reason why they started the boomer shooter, era, in my opinion, with Dusk and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And New Blood are kind of like the rock stars of indie gaming right now.
Yeah, and here I am, a pixelated horror game with only a gun with one bullet, and so it's hardly a shooter game. And I don't know if I've told you about my first call with Dave, but that was in 2019, and that was on Dave Szymanski's recommendation, because me and David were in a Steam clan together for Aliens vs. Predator 2000.
Okay.
We were in a clan that I started, and we'd play like quote unquote competitively, and we had our little gamer tag, on our usernames and stuff, and we would talk about old school shooters and stuff. And then after a few years, we decided to take our relationship to the next level and become Facebook friends. And we would show each other the games we were making, and he would show me early builds of Dusk and be like, hey, this is a game I'm making. Like, could you play it and let me know what you think? I was like, yeah, sure, man. It was incredible. And, the fact that you could jump on a launch pad and do a backflip, freely, and then shoot someone with a rifle without a scope, across the map. That was like really fun gameplay. And I showed him Faith, and we started talking about how much attention it was getting. And he was like, hey, have you ever thought about getting a publisher for Faith? And I had just finished watching this GDC talk called You Don't Need an Effing Publisher. So I was thinking to myself, like, nah, man, I'm in it for the love of the game. Like, I'm going to work for myself. The publisher is just going to keep me down. And he was like, well, just talk with Dave. I think he'd really be interested in this. Like, I showed it to him, and he wants to play it and stuff. So I took a Discord call with Dave, and the first thing he said was we love Faith. I've been playing it, and it scares the hell out of me. And we'd love to be your publisher. And I was like, completely disarmed me. And I was like, okay, go on. And this is like unlike anything I expected from a game publisher. And he basically spelled out a publishing deal that was like, it was spoiling me. Like, I got spoiled with my publishing deal. It was the absolute best deal I could have asked for at that time in my career. And he made it clear from the beginning that control of the IP was mine. I could work on it solo if I wanted to, or I could get a team together. But he had a general timeline for when he recommended things to get done, and what he wanted to see and what his vision was for the full Unholy Trinity. And that was all I needed. I signed it, and the rest is history. So I'm very thankful that Dave took a chance on me, and he has a great knack for finding people and projects and stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm very thankful for that. I don't know why I went on that tangent, but I think we were originally talking about like pricing and stuff. And one of the first things he said was, you can't charge $1 for your games anymore, man. Like, you worked so hard on this stuff. It's so like customized and handcrafted. Yeah. And he said, we need to be charging, at least this much. And I was like, that's insane. And he's like, just trust me. And And man, it's like I've never regretted going along with Dave or agreeing with Dave on a suggestion or a a marketing
Oh yeah.
campaign or something like that. He's just got a talent
Oh
for
yeah.
it.
I mean, it's good that you went on this tangent because this was kind of my next subject. It is a topic that I'm personally interested in, and I think a lot of indie developers are interested in this. So you work with New Blood, and New Blood is kind of like an exception right now. As far as I know, they're not even looking for new games to publish at this point, and some
There's a
developers are
couple of
looking for
exceptions, but
publishers.
yeah, they're not taking
Yeah,
many pitches right now. Yeah.
yeah. Right now, like some developers are looking for publishers. Some developers are thinking if they should work with publishers.
Yeah.
What would you recommend for a newbie developer? Would you recommend them to work with a publisher or do it themselves, self-publish? What would you say
There's
to a newbie developer?
Yeah, there's too much evidence to make me say either way, either one, I could say like, yes, get a publisher, they'll help you out, they'll, take your game to the next level, but then like, Undertale, Five Nights at Freddy's, Slender the Eight Pages, they didn't have publishers and they were complete game changers. But that's like diamond in the rough stuff, Um, and I'm not saying people like Toby Fox and Scott Cawthon it was like sheer luck. I think that they had an incredible design vision for their games and it just worked, And I could say you don't need a publisher, but then again, hundreds of indie games get released every day and don't get played. So you have to ask yourself as the creator, as the developer, like, why are you doing this, And I don't mean that in a like mean way. I mean, like, be honest with yourself. Like, what do you want to accomplish? Do you just want a game out there? Do you just want to make something personal and kind of small and self-contained and but that is really conveys your love of games and your personality? So do you need to be on a path where your goal is to sell your game, and make revenue from it? If that is your goal, then I respect that, That's one of the goals with me. That was one of my goals with finding a publisher, is to get to where I could sell, Faith on a larger platform and see what happens. So you really got to decide for yourself why you want to do this. If you're just kind of messing around and experimenting and just want to see what people think, then I wouldn't recommend a publisher for that, unless they were very, very easygoing and very like supportive, unless they were going to spoil you like New Blood did to me. So no, I wouldn't recommend a publisher for that. There's all kinds of self-publishing options you can do to get your game on consoles. It's easier than I thought. It was total like black magic to get your game on consoles, but there's some IDEs that that make the process like survivable for a small developer. And it didn't take much effort for me to email a couple of YouTubers, like Risk Rim and Manly Badass Hero and stuff. They were open to my emails and my messages, and they played Faith, and they were, integral or they were, essential to getting the word out. Now, if you've assembled a team and your team is very good, and you've got something that you think could go like indie premium or something like that, and your goal is to like form a studio, find success, make revenue, use that revenue to make a living, and support yourself, then yeah, I think you should go for a publisher if that's kind of the route you want to take. The big catch, and I've seen this, not only has this happened in my career, like with me personally, but with close friends and other developers that I know, is that not all publishers have your best interest in mind. Your publisher might have your best interest in mind, but whoever's leading the publisher might not have your best interest in mind, or are putting their interests above yours. So there are crooks. Like, I'll be the first person to say they're total crooks in, right here in the indie horror games industry. And they usually get their comeuppance. They usually get let go and stuff. But in the meantime, they can do some real damage. Some real damage. I have buddies who've had complete breakdowns, in their mental state, in their emotional state, while making a game for a publisher, and it made them want to stay out of games for like months. They didn't know if they wanted to do it again, and it took them a long time to get motivated. So my advice to you, the developers out there, is to get really good at reading agreements and contracts, and do everything you can to have a legal representative review your contracts. It's going to cost you, but if you're already at the point where you're discussing a contract with a publisher, you owe it to yourself to have a professional look at it, because you never know. You never know if you sign on with a publisher to make a Switch port for your highly popular PC game, and in that contract they slip in a clause that gives merchandise rights for your game that they didn't develop, they're just porting it to Switch, to them to sell merchandise of your game that you made, that they had nothing to do with the development of. That's a true story. So you got to read the...
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, you got to read the contract. And, so I hope I've made myself clear that, like, getting a publisher can be a huge risk. Again, I consider myself very blessed to have landed in New Blood's nest. I feel like I'm with a bunch of eagles in a nest, and I'm like a baby penguin who can't even fly that somehow made its way into this nest. Like how am I here? I'm very inspired by the guys at New Blood and stuff, and very exciting things, in store for Faith. We just signed a pretty big, like, merchandise and collectibles deal that we can hopefully announce this year. And we're going to Bit Summit in Kyoto to show off Faith to the Japanese market. And we're going to do some stuff with Faith to localize it that's going to hopefully be very cool, like, to Japanese players. And, and we're working on, more console ports for Faith that we'll be able to announce in the summer and hopefully have released, sometime this year. Another thing about publishers. So going back to that, and all that's possible because I chose a good publisher, Another thing about publishers is that the pay structure can be very different from publisher to publisher. Things change when money is on the line, whether you're working with a friend or whether you're working with strangers, at a publisher that you are yet to form a relationship with. So you can get money up front for a dev fee, where it's like, here's money, but just enough money to finish the game. So please get it done in time. Or there's other publishers I know that will do quarterly reviews of your work, and that will determine what they pay you for the next quarter, because they don't really have hard deadlines. They just have a lot of projects, and they just kind of wing it with the release dates. There's some that want you to work for free until you get, like, a revenue share, which I would avoid. There's also scheduling. When you work for yourself and there's no pressure to, like, release the game on anything but your terms, you can have a day off or a week off or a month off for mental health. You can goof off for most of the day and play Elden Ring instead of working on your game, if that's what refreshes you and gets you inspired. You can slip away and go watch a movie in the middle of the day and come back, and you can be with your family on the weekends and stuff. Now, there's working at a publisher and there's working for a publisher. I work at a publisher. Dave had some strong suggestions for content and release date, but whenever there was a delay, and there were several delays from when we actually wanted to release the Unholy Trinity, he was just like, it is what it is. Like, but don't make these people wait too long, you know. And so they were very lenient with me and very like supportive if I, was like, hey guys, I'm just not feeling it this week. I don't have anything to show. I'm sorry. They're like, no worries, shit happens, But other publishers that you could work at might be less personable and less supportive. So my recommendation is to interview developers that have worked at those publishers and be like, hey, what were they like? What was the pay structure like, or the pay schedule like? Did they recoup? Some publishers will do a recoup plus 30%, and that is insane. Some publishers will take a 50-50 revenue split, which is insane. It should always be at least 65% in your favor, in my opinion.
The developers should always get more. In my
absolutely. So watch out for red flags like that, and any of y'all can DM me, or email me if you've got questions about that, because I'm really happy to answer them. The last thing I'll say about publishers is that you could work at a publisher or you could work for a publisher. If you need a lot of structure and a lot of like motivation to move forward, and you kind of need someone to tell you what to do, with clear consequences, and incentives to get your work done on time, then you could take the plunge and go with a publisher that you're basically working for. That's not really my bag, but I understand that some people need that type of motivation and structure. So you really kind of have to know yourself, but gather intel and do your reconnaissance on publishers and ask around, ask for people's experience working for them, or at them, what the overall vibe was, what the attitude of the leadership was. Did you feel like your game was a product, or did you feel like you mattered? You and your development journey and the journey of this game mattered, down to the finest detail, So anyway, that's all I'll say about publishing. But yeah, it's a lot to answer to, when one asks like, hey, what is it like working for a publisher? Should I get a publisher? It's such a big topic, and there's so much that goes into it.
And then that's why I asked this, and that's why I asked it to Nate in the first episode, and that's why I will ask this pretty much in every episode, because it's a question without a black or white answer. Everybody has different experiences with this. Some people choose to go self-publishing, some people go with a publisher. It is important to just listen to a lot of voices and see how people's experiences were. And it's good that you are here and talking about, for example, your experience with New Blood, and they're being supportive. But you also are talking about how you knew about other publishers too, how you made your research, how you are actively talking to other developers and listening to them too. I think that is really important, and it brings me back to the closed community of indie developers. Like, do not be afraid to talk to other developers. Do not be afraid to send a message. I mean, even send a message to me. I know a lot of publishers.
Oh, yeah.
I help them with marketing. I help them with some of them with scouting. I know a lot of them. Like, do not be afraid to just talk to people before signing a contract, because like annoying a developer by asking them questions, it's not as important as signing a contract that you're gonna regret later. I think that is really important.
Yeah, I would hate to see a repeat of my friend who just had a complete mental and emotional breakdown while working with a publisher trying to get this game out. I would hate to see that repeat itself and discourage more potential game changers in the indie horror game scene. From staying the course and working on what they love, So yeah. I mean, I'm a resource. I can't give legal advice, obviously, but I can point you in the right direction. I can tell you what I think about a deal or a contract. If I have time.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that is kind of the gist of it. Like why I also wanted to make this podcast to get people on the right track with this stuff. So that kind of brings me to another kind of related topic, and this will be one of the last topics, because we are already past an hour, which is okay. I don't really have a limit for the podcast, but I don't want to keep you forever. The mental and the financial burden of developing a game by yourself.
Yeah.
This is a topic that a lot of developers think about, because a lot of people don't have the opportunity to work on a game, 24/7. They have to work, they have to go to school, they have to do this, do that. How was your experience with the mental and the financial burden of developing your own game? How did you afford it mentally and financially until you found a publisher?
Yeah, great question. So throughout the production of Faith, I was sometimes working multiple part-time jobs during the day. My spouse was also working full-time. And like we went through buying a house, me getting laid off from my day job, multiple day jobs, going to school, earning a degree, crazy family stuff that happened. We went through all of it. The constant is, do you know curling? You know that Olympic sport? Curling is where it's on ice and there's this giant round puck and someone pushes it towards a goal and there's a team of people sweeping in front of the puck. I guarantee you've seen it. And there's people sweeping in front of the puck to keep the ice nice, keep the friction in just the right state to where the puck can keep going down the ice and settle exactly where it needs to settle on this target. So that's curling. My hopes and dreams, and my goals of being a game developer are the puck. And my spouse has always been the person sweeping and getting things out of the way and making sure that the conditions are just right for me to follow my dreams and do what I want to do. So, she worked full time throughout all of it. She gave birth to 2 kids and kept the house in order. And I went to school, basically from the hours of like 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. during the weeknights. And on the weekends when I could steal away some time, I was working on Faith, And that was just a financial necessity for us because we had no idea, I had no idea how Faith was going to perform on Steam. It performed very well and is doing very well for us, so we've been able to kind of relax. But not everyone has that luxury or that privilege or whatever. But yeah, that was the financial situation we were in. And I still have a day job, but it's relatively chill compared to what I was doing. And we're just, we're hoping for that long tail, that they tell you about in game sales, and then I'm really excited that I kind of have the freedom to start looking into more projects and possibly, contracting other people to help me, collaborate on them. As far as the mental stuff, man, you got to be real about it. It's a thing. You could work for yourself and still be in crunch, because you crunch yourself.
Yeah.
I certainly did. That last month, I was working very, very hard. I was in a exhausted, a state of exhaustion and frustration and just fear that nobody would like the game for a solid month. And again, it was the QA team and the leadership at New Blood that really helped me get through it. The craziest thing that I did not expect was the kind of postpartum depression that I got after I finally released Faith. I got it out, we started seeing sales, we were really excited about that. Comments and feedback and reviews were starting to come in. YouTubers were playing it. It was very exciting. But after just a short while, I was disgusted by Faith. Like, I was disgusted by my own game. I didn't want to play it. I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to talk about it. I certainly didn't want to work on it to update it. And it took me the better part of a year, to be perfectly honest, after Faith, the Unholy Trinity released, to finally motivate myself to, at full speed, to work on the game and work on updates and stuff. It was insane. The closest thing I could compare it to, is, after giving birth, there's like postpartum depression that sometimes happens, and that's exactly what I experienced. one of the rays of sunshine, besides like going to therapy and like being medicated and stuff, was a huge help. Self-care and all that. One of the biggest rays of sunshine was when I finally confided in in some people at New Blood about this, how I was feeling, how I was doing, because I was so ashamed, And the response I got was, yeah, us too, man. Like, not in a condescending way, but in a really supportive way. They were like, dude, we all go through that. Like, we all experience burnout. We all have we all have lows and highs, and we all, our motivation and attitude kind of ebbs and flows. And that really meant a lot to hear that from them, because it made me realize that I wasn't alone and that things were going to be okay, And so that's not to say that like I don't have like bouts of depression. Like I still kind of have seasonal and situational depression and anxiety, but it really helps that I, getting supportive words of support from New Blood, and from other friends, and being open and honest about it. But yeah, it's a reality, It can be a very rough ride, especially when it comes to player feedback, because when we're talking to each other on the internet, it can be anonymous. So some people take that to mean that they can be as mean as they want and they don't have to suffer any consequences for it. Like my least favorite thing in the whole wide world is when players punish a game developer by reporting bugs and crashes and errors in a negative Steam review. Like, I don't think they realize just how much that hurts the visibility of a game. I think they do realize it, and that's why they do that. So there's like seven other avenues they could report a bug to, and we'll get on it, when we can. And
that's always sounded like the same thing as never work. You never work in service industry, and you will never understand what a service industry employee goes through.
Oh yeah.
So if you never develop a game, you will never understand how much that hurts.
I think so. Yeah, no, you're fine. It's definitely a thing, and the struggle to accept that I could do nothing about it was the hardest. Was very, very hard. It was just as difficult as the depressive episode that I had after I after I released Faith. So that's the reality, and whenever I get the chance to talk about it, I try to be as honest as possible. But you know what? That's my personal experience. I know developers who are like, "What's depression?" Like, I don't know what that is. I just make the game. They don't. It's not that their heart isn't in it. It's just that they're resilient. And then there are others that that really struggle. So just be aware. Whether you're working for yourself or working for another person, like it's a lot of pressure. It can be really rough and frustrating. Working with other people can be really frustrating sometimes, and self-care, man, and being honest about what you're going through, and communication. I think more and more companies are starting to respect the mental and emotional needs of their workers. There's always exceptions, right? There's always going to be the corporation that doesn't care. But I think in games especially, we're starting to see evidence of how people can totally crack, from the AAA space to indie, So I'm hoping that the industry will continue to trend towards being cognizant and respectful of people's mental and emotional needs. I don't know how we're gonna get any games released, in the industry if like we're all taking time off for mental health, but I think it'll work itself out. And I think there's been recent instances of games that were delayed for those reasons, or they had to take a step back or go at a slower pace, and it was actually met with respect, and understanding. I hope we trend more towards that in the future. I really do.
Yeah, I hope so too. At least in the indie scene, I can see that happening. The AAA scene is still, unfortunately, plagued with inhumane stuff, but at least that is also improving a little. And this is why why I wanted to ask this, and it's one of the topics that I'm most interested in doing this podcast: the mental and the financial burden of creating a game. Because people usually think that this is only happening to them, this depression and the mental burden, and that's not the case at all. It happens to pretty much everyone. It's like creating art. It's like making music. Everything creative. Every person who ever created something has gone through similar things in life, and I think it's so important to talk about that, especially in game development scene, where this scene was governed by men for a long time, and men are particularly worse at talking about their mental problems. So I think it is really important for us to just talk about this and be open and just tell people that, hey, you're not alone in this. Do not give up on game development. Just take a break, talk to some people, and it's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm glad that it ended up working out with you. I'm glad that you had a supporting partner and just things have worked out with your publisher too.
I mean, she doesn't even like games. She was still very supportive.
That's even better. She just supported you because you were so passionate about it. I think that's even more important.
Yeah, I have a lot to be thankful for, really.
That's incredible. Yeah. Well, slowly going through the closing remarks, I wanted to ask you, obviously this is kind of a private question, but are you actively working on maybe developing something new, conceptualizing?
Yeah.
Are we gonna see a new Airdorf game anytime soon?
Yeah, so I'm involved with a project with a content creator who makes really cool kind of like video kind of format stuff, and I'm collaborating with him and Torpal Duke and Jesse Cox and Trevor Henderson, who created Siren Head, and a few streamers and a few influencers to turn this content creator's videos into a point-and-click adventure game. And we tried it with a content creator with Molly Moon. I forgot to talk about Excuse Me, Sir, my most recent game, the demo. So after that kind of went under, I wasn't looking for an alternative. I was looking for the person that I wanted to work with after we did the Molly Moon game. So it wasn't like they were the second choice. And they were really open to it, and we're slowly but surely working on a demo that we are hoping to release for Steam Next Fest, hopefully in June. I'm crossing my fingers. It might have to wait till August, but that one's going to be really cool. Let me tell you something about the Molly Moon game. The demo on itch.io, it was like traffic-wise and numbers-wise, it was doing better after 2 months than Faith did in like 4 years on itch. So Faith, my most popular game, this demo performed 4 times as better, or it matched the performance of 4 years of Faith in just 2 months. It was going to be insane if we had gotten it on Steam and seen it through to release. But stuff happened. She gave her reasons for dropping out in private, so I'll leave it at that unless she wants to tell everyone herself. But moving forward with that new project, I started kind of toying around with concepts and ideas for Faith Chapter 4 in January, and so I go back and play around with that. Let's see, I'm working on another pixelated horror game that's not related to Faith. It might come out next year. I recently secured the rights to distribute Summer Night for myself, so not under the DreadX label. Oh. So there's going to be a Steam release for Summer Night, and with a few additions and new artwork for the in-game sprites done by my intern. There's a non-horror game that I'm working on that I'm just kind of slowly kind of workshopping. So yeah, like things are cooking, just nothing that I can really announce right now.
Hey, if you ever need a playtester,
hell yeah, dude. I fully intend to make a Faith Chapter 4, and at least 1 or 2 Faith spin-offs,
Yeah, that I think that would be great. I think people are also kind of like expecting something new from the Faith side, And for the longest time, I thought you were done with the series, but it's good to hear that you're actually at least conceptualizing a sequel.
Yeah, so if you've played survival mode on the latest update for Faith, then that'll give you kind of an idea of what Chapter 4 is going to be like, or at least where it's going to be set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll definitely fix that mistake and just play episodes 2 and 3 and just get that out.
Hey,
of the
do
way
what you got to
finally,
do. Like
just,
you're the guy when it comes to indie horror games, and getting the word out. So I'm assuming you're very busy.
The backlog is endless. But yeah, that's good to hear from you that you keep creating stuff.
Oh, I can't stop, man. I've got like 50 game ideas, logged away, more than I'll ever be able to make in my life, which is kind of a depressing thought, but at least I'll never be out of ideas,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you are an artist now, and you just keep making that art, and I think that's important. I will be here to support you and look forward to your games, just like any other Fate fan out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I hope to do this for as long as I can.
Oh yeah. Well, now I'm gonna end the episode and not keep you here any longer. Could you shout out yourself where people can find you?
Yeah. If you need to email me, you can email me at contact@airdorf.com, and my DMs are always open, or they'll be open for as long as I can stand it, on Twitter. So say hi. I typically don't accept friend requests from randos on Discord. And then I'm on YouTube. Just Google Airdorf. I'm like the only Airdorf out there. So you just Google me and you'll usually find my platforms. I just now started making content for Instagram and TikTok, years after the fact, and I'm having fun with that. So you can follow me on there. I usually post silly memes and stuff on there.
All right, Airdorf everywhere. I will also include this in the video, in the description as well. Well, sir, thank you for being on the second episode of Game Dev is Not Easy. I enjoyed our conversation very much. I hope you did too. And I will be looking forward to what you're cooking.
Yeah, man. This was a blast. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Absolutely. And then maybe we can have another episode sometime in the future after you maybe announce some of those projects so we can talk about them.
Yeah,
too.
I'd love to chat about them. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, all right then. I'll see you later.
Okay, thank you.
And that was it, folks. Thank you for listening to the second episode of Game Dev is Not Easy. I hope you enjoyed it. I had so much fun talking to Airdorf, and I forgot to ask him the golden question of the podcast, if you think game dev is easy or not. But I believe we already kind of talked about it during the podcast when we were talking about the mental and financial struggles. So hopefully that will be an answer enough for people who are curious about that. I also didn't put subtitles on this episode because YouTube already has closed captions, and it takes me a lot of time to put subtitles in videos. But if I see that people are still wanting them, I will absolutely work extra and add those in. Another thing is that I finally took care of Spotify and Apple Music. They were actually easier than I thought. So you can find the podcast on Spotify and Apple Music, and just listen to it there instead of going to YouTube, because I know you cannot keep YouTube open on your phone if you lock the screen, if you don't have premium. So this will be better for you out there if you need it. If you listen to it on those platforms, please share it around and rate it so more people can see it, so it can appear in the algorithm. But that is going to be it. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.